Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to be tackling Chilean water management.
Oh, great topic.
Yeah, and I know it's something that you've been wanting to understand a little better,
Yeah.
especially, with all the talk about drought and the country's kind of evolving needs, right?
It's a hot topic.
It is a hot topic.
Yeah.
So we've got a few reports to guide us here. We've got one from the World Bank back in 2013.
Okay.
We have another from the OECD in 2017.
Uh-huh.
And then a pretty recent one from the Chilean National Water Roundtable
Oh, wow.
from 2022.
Very recent.
Super recent. So
Right.
our mission today is to kind of unearth
Yeah.
all the essential insights, right, into
Sure.
this whole Chilean water management
Yeah.
system.
The institutions involved, the challenges, the potential solutions,
Yeah,
and what it all means for you, the listener.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I think one of the first things that struck me as I was reviewing these reports
Okay.
was just the sheer number of institutions involved.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So the World Bank report, for example, identified over 20 institutions
Wow.
that were dealing with water information management alone.
Wow.
Just water information management.
Okay.
Then you add to that like 15 for policy and planning,
So
16 for water rights administration, and the list just goes on and on.
it's like they threw a water management party and everyone's invited.
Yeah.
But seriously, I mean, with so many institutions involved, that has to create some
Oh, yeah.
serious logistical challenges, right?
Absolutely. I mean, while having numerous groups could foster collaboration, it also creates issues like duplication of efforts.
Yeah.
You have multiple institutions all working on the same task, right?
Yeah.
Then there are gaps in responsibility.
Uh,
Things fall through the cracks because no one is really clearly accountable.
right.
And then finally, there's the issue of capacity.
Right.
Many of these institutions just don't have the resources,
The resources.
the expertise, or the funding
Mhm.
to really operate effectively.
So it sounds like a recipe for inefficiency,
Yeah,
especially when you're dealing with something as critical as,
Yeah.
Water management.
absolutely.
And speaking of challenges,
Yeah.
these reports also dive into Chile's ongoing struggle with drought.
Yeah.
And the 2022 National Water Roundtable report really emphasizes this,
Mm-hmm.
calling it like an immediate crisis.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Chile has been grappling with this severe drought for over a decade now.
Wow.
And the impacts, they're really widespread and significant.
Okay.
The report paints this really stark picture of rural communities that are just struggling to access basic water,
Wow.
which has a cascading effect on
Check.
sanitation and hygiene.
Yeah.
And then it also highlights the rising tensions between different water users,
Yeah.
like agriculture, industry, and urban areas.
That's alarming.
Yeah.
It really underscores how a drought isn't just about a dry spell.
Right.
It's like these ripple effects on entire society and economies.
It touches everything.
Yeah, reading about those tensions between different users, it kind of makes me think about Chile's unique water rights system
Oh, yeah.
that was established by the 1981 Water Code.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading about how that system actually allows for private ownership of water rights.
It's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
The 1981 Water Code essentially treats water as a commodity.
Okay.
You can buy it,
Wow.
you can sell it,
Really?
you can inherit it,
Wow.
just like any other asset.
That's a very different approach from what we see in a lot of other countries.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I'm curious, what are the arguments for and against this kind of system?
Well, so those who support the system, they argue that it leads to economic efficiency, right?
Okay.
The idea is that the market will determine the most valuable uses for water,
Uh-huh.
and it will ensure that it flows to where it's needed most.
Okay.
But critics, they argue that it hasn't necessarily led to conservation
Okay.
or equitable distribution. Instead, they point to issues like monopolies, speculation, and a lack of incentives
Right.
for sustainable water use.
So there's a real debate about
Yeah.
the long-term impacts of this system,
Absolutely.
especially in the context of drought
Yeah.
and growing water scarcity.
Right.
It makes me wonder, how does this market-based approach affect small farmers, for instance,
Yeah.
compared to large water-intensive industries?
Right.
I imagine there's some inherent tension there.
You've hit on a crucial point. The 1981 Water Code has created a very complex landscape with winners and losers.
Yeah.
And depending on where you stand within that system,
Right.
you might view it as either a solution or a problem.
Right, and I imagine a prolonged drought would only amplify those
Absolutely.
existing tensions, right?
For sure.
So speaking of potential solutions,
Hmm.
all three reports offer some recommendations for tackling these challenges.
Yes, they do.
And one idea that seems to pop up is strengthening
Yes.
rural water systems.
That's a key focus, especially in the 2022 report. Okay.
They call for improvements in management, things like training operators, improving data collection,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's also a need for updated infrastructure designs that are more resilient to drought and climate change.
So making those systems more robust.
Yeah.
Less vulnerable to disruption.
Yeah.
What else is being proposed?
Another recurring theme is the need for strategic basin planning.
Yes.
Both the OECD and the 2022 reports really advocate for this shift
Okay.
from managing water in isolation to a more integrated approach.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
Uh-huh.
Can you break down what basin planning actually entails?
Essentially, it means coordinating water management at the level of the entire watershed.
Okay.
And this involves considering the needs of all water users within that basin, right?
Mhm.
So cities, farms, industries,
Okay.
and finding ways to share resources more effectively and sustainably.
It sounds like it requires a high degree of collaboration
Yes.
and a willingness to kind of think beyond traditional
Right?
boundaries. Absolutely.
I'm curious, are there any real-world examples of successful basin planning initiatives, either in Chile or elsewhere, that they highlight in these reports?
Well, there are certainly examples from around the world that could offer valuable lessons.
Okay.
The Murray-Darling Basin in Australia, for instance, has faced similar challenges with drought and competing water demands. And they've implemented a basin plan that really emphasizes collaborative governance,
Okay.
environmental flows, and adaptive management.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that these complex water management problems aren't insurmountable.
Right.
It sounds like learning from other regions facing similar issues could be really beneficial for Chile.
Absolutely. Adapting successful models to the Chilean context could be incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond specific solutions,
Yeah.
there's a broader theme that emerges from these reports.
Okay.
And that's the critical role of information and data.
Right. Knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
I was especially interested in that idea of a national unified water information system.
Yeah.
And that was proposed in the 2022 report.
Uh-huh.
Having a central platform for all that water-related data
Mhm.
sounds incredibly useful.
It would be a game changer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a system where policymakers, researchers, businesses,
Mhm.
citizens could easily access information about water availability, usage patterns, drought impacts,
Right.
even the performance of different water management strategies.
Yeah.
It could significantly improve transparency and accountability.
Yeah. That kind of transparency could be really empowering.
Right.
It allows citizens to hold decision makers accountable and actually participate in shaping
Yeah,
water policy.
for sure.
But before we go too deep into the potential of this system, I want to make sure we cover another critical aspect of Chilean water management,
Okay.
and that's the role of the mining industry.
Oh, of course. Yeah,
Chile is a global mining powerhouse,
it is.
and mining is incredibly water intensive,
It is a thirsty business.
especially for a country that's already grappling with drought. That dynamic has to create some serious challenges. So I'm really curious to hear more about how these reports address that tension.
Yeah, it's a big issue. Yeah, it certainly does. The OECD report in particular really dives into the significant water demands of the mining sector, especially in like the northern regions where you have a lot of these mines located
Right.
and where water scarcity is already a major concern.
So you've got this situation where like a vital industry for Chile's economy
Right.
is also a major consumer of a resource
Yeah.
that's becoming increasingly scarce.
Yeah.
So finding that sustainable balance has got to be crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually becoming even more complex
Oh, really?
with this global push for renewable energy technologies.
That's interesting. How is this shift towards renewable energy adding to the water stress?
Well, because all these,
Yeah,
technologies
yeah.
like solar panels, wind turbines, electric vehicle batteries, they all require a significant amount of copper. And as global demand for these metals rises,
Yeah.
so does the pressure on water resources in countries like Chile that produce them.
It's like this unintended consequence of the Green Revolution,
Kind of, yeah.
where we're trying to move towards more sustainable energy sources. but the production of those technologies is putting a strain on water resources elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. It's
Yeah.
a reminder that we need to think holistically about sustainability
Right.
and consider the entire life cycle of these technologies
Absolutely.
from, extraction to disposal.
Okay, so given these challenges, what are the reports saying about how Chile's mining industry can be